Right now, what we're doing is we have digital main STLs. We use Cambium and some Dragon Wave equipment, to do basically IP to all of our transmitter sites. And then we feed the audio digitally to the audio sites, to the transmitter sites. But then right now, as I speak, we're using some of our HD2 and HD3 multicasts as emergency backups. That's not ideal, because if you've messed with these multicasts at all, they tend to be delayed by 20, 30 seconds. So especially if you've got glitching audio and it keeps switching back and forth, your listeners are going to get whiplash, because they go, wait a minute, didn't he just say that? And then all of a sudden it cuts back to real time or close to real time, and you're going, we're right in the middle of a spot or something. So what we're doing is we have finally been able to get Spectrum. It's one of our providers here. I don't know if you've got them in Canada, but Spectrum is currently running high-speed internet access to all of our sites. Also not ideal, but it's a lot better than being off air. That's what we're going to be doing for backup. We are working on a way, incidentally, to use our WheatNet, which is comparable to Axia and some of the others, audio over IP. We're in the process of converting to use the WheatNet over our digital links. We've upgraded all of them. I think the slowest one now is like 250 megabits. So there's plenty of bandwidth. You don't need a whole lot of bandwidth for good quality audio. Now, video is a different story. Fortunately, we're radio. All right. And let's see, we'll get back to the output. There's your adjustments. And by the way, I've got a Omnia, I want to say it's a 9. I'll pull it up in a minute, we'll know. But it was basically refurbished and optimized for AM. And trying to navigate the screens in that thing is a trip, because it's still, a lot of the buttons and selections are still labeled for FM, like diversity, setting the pre-emphasis, setting this, setting that. You can tell it was for FM. Another reason to read the manual. Unfortunately, it didn't come with a manual, not an updated one. Like I said, this was a special deal that I think Chris worked out with Frank Fody. He had some old ones sitting around and said, hey, let's put an AM module in them. And Chris said, let's do it. This is very important. You'll see this if you look through the manual. You can do a web search on it. You can see the mouse cursor, right?
Yes.
Just making sure. Okay. I've mentioned this before, but it really needs to be emphasized that you're going to use different clipping for HD or any digital stream as opposed to regular FM or AM. The digital streams need a different type of clipping or they're going to sound terrible. They don't sound as good because digital codecs do not like sudden, sharp, abrupt clipping. Whereas if you're an analog or even AES, feeding your FM or AM, brief clipping events are not really noticeable. They can be noticeable because they're going to confuse your codec. Your codec's not going to know quite what to make of them. Frank Fody at Omnia is the one who did a lot of the groundwork on that. He figured out that you needed more of a look ahead. And since you're going to be using diversity delay, you can correct for that. But you're going to want to do some look ahead. You're going to want to be a little smoother about clipping your peaks. You can't just chop them off. You're not going to use back-to-back 1N90 or 1N91 or 4148 diodes on a digital stream. It won't sound good. In fact, you'll see this is our diversity delay for HD and FM. This is the delay. It's going to delay the FM signal. We never use the delay that's built into the HD equipment. Probably the biggest reason is because of the delay, and every one we've used, especially the older ones, the older stuff that we had, the ones that were the big, gigantic 4-rack space high rack mount things. You'd spend an hour trying to get your delay set. It's so much quicker with this, and I use an extremely high-tech method. I have an HD receiver on one ear. I have the analog on the other ear, and I keep adjusting until you can't tell any difference. There's no motion. And it's, of course, you're going to want to do it on a mono, something like, for example, voice. While there's voice on, you don't want to try that with stereo. You won't quite nail it. But if there's voice, any kind of a mono program going on at that moment, you can nail it. Now, there are receivers now. We have the Golden Eagle that can help you nail it down, to within a sample or two. But I've been able to get it close enough to where at least you don't hear an abrupt change or an abrupt jump when it's switching from HD back to analog, listening on an FM HD radio. But anyway, you'll notice the standard, when they first published the spec, they told us what, 8 seconds, 7 seconds? In actual fact, you'll see this was removed from service just a few months ago. We had to have a little over 9 seconds of delay on the analog to make it match and marry up with the HD signal. We also spend the time to make sure that the sound, the loudness between the HD and the FM is about the same. And I'll discuss some tricks for that too. But again, having two radios, one analog and one HD, is just a perfect way to compare things. If you have to do it late at night, and just deliberately run mono in and see what you think. All right, processor style. Composite clipper, this is for the multiplex. This would be for the analog. I chose the composite clipper. It's very slightly more distorted, but it does tend to be a little bit louder. Look ahead limiter. There's another option. If you could actually use this to drive two separate digital streams. I don't know why you'd want maybe situation. Use the look ahead limiter here, because that look ahead and the smoother clipping is a lot better on any digital encoding. I don't have to worry about BS412, thank you, Lord. Notice the processing. I'm only driving that composite clipper by 0.8 dBs. To my ear, that was a pretty good. I really didn't want any audible distortion. If you're willing to put up with some audible distortion, you pump that a little bit further. I'll still be your friend, but I'm not going to do that. Pilot injection, we standardize on 9. Don't know why it makes me feel good to have that 1% of headroom, but hey, if I'm happy, there you go. And then, I'd have to look in the manual to see what that is. I can't remember now what that does. The SCA or analysis, but you see I have two SCA inputs. There's the outputs. It so turned out my old BE on transmitter 2, BE FM30, wanted a little more audio than the new Nautel, the GV40. TX1 was our Nautel GV40. This was a BE FM30, an older tube transmitter. But that's pretty standard, and you've seen that, and you don't need me to belabor that point. This is where you're going to start. Once you get your input set to where you're getting decent banging on the meters. You don't want to go in, you don't want to overload, and you'll notice I'm at I go a little bit over -4. I'd probably drop that a little before I put this on air. But anyway, once you get your input set, This is where you begin the magic. Now, take a sip of tea, excuse me. Omnia, the Vorsys, really all the decent processors, including the digital optimods. I mean, all of them are going to have ways for you to save presets. And you will see that I actually have several in here with the date so that I can go back to what I'm doing. That is extremely important. If you tweak a preset, be sure to save it under a new name. Don't get in a hurry and just hit save, and overwrite the old one, because that way you can always go back, because invariably some of the tweaks you make, people aren't going to like. They're going to say, what happened to the bass? And instead of trying to remember where you were, you just go back to that preset while you go back and try again. But of course, when you're setting this up, they give you all of them. Even we've got a little, what is it called? Broadcast Warehouse Processor, made in England. Nice little unit. But all of them are going to give you some suggested presets. There's your quick start, CHR, country. Pick one that's the closest to your format. Of course, you're having fun, so if you want to, Omnia has some that with names like nuclear, airstrike, meteor strike, or whatever. You can always play with those. Urban aggressive, that's a very loud one. I've tried it, even though we don't have an urban format. Hot AC, and then hot AC with additional brightness. That's going to have a little extra high end in it. So what you're doing, you pick one, and that's a simple matter of stick your headphones into it, or better yet, hook it up to speakers. And as we discussed in the very first meeting, use speakers that are similar to what your listeners will be listening to, so you can get a better idea of what you're giving them. But set up your speakers, listen to them, and you'll hear the difference. You'll find one that's pretty close to what you want. All right. Then we will go start tweaking the preset. Oh, that's the analysis setting. Oh, I know what I need to do. In order to really tweak this one, all right, we go to sound. This is your quick adjust. I can do how much compression on the input I want. In other words, how deeply I want it. Density is how hard you're driving it. This, by the way, is the training wheel setup. This is, doesn't give you much chance to do a whole lot. This is the quick setup. We have, I think it's still on this computer. We have they have what they call the GUI, which, good mercy, you can go in and adjust everything. And actually, I recommend against that. Try this first. Give plenty of time and several different songs on each one. Like, I punch up this loudness a little bit. Listen to different music or voice, whatever your format is. And then once you have everything the way you want, of course, you come over here, save a preset. One nice thing they have, and I'm going to look at the Omnia in a few minutes. I'm pretty sure Omnia lets you do an A and B. Vorsys has this A and B so that you can instantly compare what your changes sounded like. What did I do? Well, let's listen. By the way, that's the all-important headphone volume. But you can hit save, and when you do that, of course, I can give it a name. I'll give it a name, save it. We'll call this Nightmare. How's that? And now that one's in my... Yep, there he is. I can go back to it anytime I want. Let me see if I can find that GUI, because not that it's something you aired. It is guru. Well, they say I am on the guru. Well, I remember Anthony asked us in our first one if there was any way we could correct for a bad codec. You can try these. They help. But that's going to be something you're just going to have to try. That's a little bit of correction, a lot of correction, a whole bunch of correction for bad, for if you're getting a really gritty audio, some kind of voice over IP. Well, I'll tell you what, guys, I am the guru of processing, and for the life of me, I can't remember how you adjusted in this. But we will definitely, now I want to go look at an Omnia. Give me just a minute. Here we are. Go back to my lovely face. And let's see, which Omni to pull up? Let's pull up the older one first. And I will show it to you just shortly. Just shortly. Come on up here. Okay, not getting it. There he is. Okay, now I hope you can see this tiny little screen, but let me share the screen. Hope you can see this tiny little fella, but at least it gives you an idea of what we're looking at. This is an older Omnia 5 on one of our AM stations. Oh yeah, that's you. This one saves the presets and actually brings up an old window. Processing. This is where I can go in, change the mix. You notice because it's AM, I backed off the bass just a little bit, and I've added a little bit of high, a little bit of crispness. Enhancement. Read the manual. They'll tell you what each of these do. Deep bass, because we like for our AMs to thunder. Warmth is your mid bass. Stereo expansion, we're not worried too much about that. Fat bass, that's an Omnia exclusive, and they just absolutely love it. This is where you'd probably do your EQing. Your crossover, you see we've got super low drive, and you'll notice I have not done these. I have not done much to these except in the lower treble range. I'm giving it just a slight bit of boost to help make the voices crisper, because there's a lot of talk on this station. This is where you can really get in trouble. Make small changes. Small changes, listen for a while, and like I said, you should be constantly saving your work under temporary preset names. They have Omnia, basically, if I recall correctly, the attack and release, those are relative numbers. In other words, they've already made it to what it should probably be for that band. In other words, that's optimized where, like in the mid limiter, attack can vary from 1, which would be great for a mid limiter, all the way to 10 for the mid limiter. Those are relative numbers. Let me close all those. And then our clipping, you notice now this is AM. I figure we can get away with a little extra clipping on that. Clipper silk is an interesting one. It actually helps smooth out the sound of clipping. Bass clip, you'll notice I'm not clipping the bass much because I found that to be a source of distortion. Limiter, this is for your HD. High frequency shelf, pulled it off just a little bit. Again, the book will tell you what you're doing. You notice I'm not limiting much at all. And I do have a lot of extra silk on that. You know, we could actually get away with a little bit lower band limiting here. 2-band on the input AGC. All this is your gain riding. This is because the guy or the gal at the studio sitting there on the mixing board is asleep and not paying attention. So this is some soft, gentle, smooth AGC just to keep the average level up for the processor. All right, let's get rid of the high band AGC. So there's that one. But this is another one. I'd hook it up. I'd check my input. You know, make sure my inputs are right. And that's what this is, basically. There's your input crossover again. We've already seen that. Now, let's go to a slightly newer one. Where is he at? Where is he at? Where are you hiding at, Omnia? All right, I'm getting upset. Have you ever noticed that on any Windows computer over time, you will tend to collect millions of icons? Have you ever noticed that? Makes it fun when you're off air and I'm trying desperately to find what I need. Here it is. That one runs Java. Here it is. Okay. Gonna take him a minute because he hates me. Who is that? That's DJC again. Oh boy, how you like that? He lets you see me put in the password, so let's change that for a minute.
Oh, come on. I'm sure the guys won't mind trying to hack that as well.
Well, yeah, I could go ahead and give you the IP addresses and port numbers, and you can just hop right in.
Well, that just steals my spare time fun.
What is this? No, I'm bad for that.
What is this, Ubiquity?
Okay, here we are. Colors are kind of terrible, but hopefully you can see what we're doing again. Let's hook him up. I may be running to the transmitter later today because I don't see our backup audio source. I don't like that. One nice thing about having everything connected now is that I can go in and look at it. By the way, I may show you, even though this has nothing to do with processing, I don't know how many of you are playing with SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol. Yeah, I see your hand wave. I use it. We just do quick summaries of everything. We're working on actual control with SNMP. Being able to send commands and receive the result. But right now, we are using it for monitoring. Setup. Well, there's my IP address. Of course, if you try to get to that on the internet, it's a Martian, but you could always try it. Once again, read the book. Let's see, I've used my input as a yes. All right, now let's adjust some things. We've installed it. We've grounded it. We've made sure that everything is nice. Hey, how do you like that? There's your preset. There's your preset. It's called thrust vector. That's especially you classical stations. That's the one you need. Yeah, I mean, Beethoven loves thrust vector. And Haydn is just so sweet if you use that thrust vector. All right, summary. Loudness monitor, which Mike DeRose still lives, folks. Stereo enhancement. Now, let's go for some detail if we can. Well, okay, I forgot. That's not how you do it. Quick tweaks. This is where you're going to do 99% of your adjustment. Again, you're going to tweak that preset a little bit. listen for a while, save your work in process. You notice I'm not driving the clipper hard here. This is the actual preset. This is the on-air processor for WDJC. This is what my listeners are listening to. I'm not driving the clipper very hard. I am driving the limiter. I know. Oh, forgive me. Guys, one thing, if I sound like I'm wandering, I've only had about 4 hours of sleep. I apologize. Limiter drive is, if I remember correctly, that's your FM output. And then this is the HD. You'll see I deliberately do not drive that HD hard. Bass thump. Again, the manual will give you a little idea how you got a sparkle control on this one. Stereo enhancement. I've increased that a little bit. And this is where it becomes pure omnia with all these really cool titles like solar plexus, subharmonic balance. Try very small changes, less than a dB, listen for a while, see what you think. Again, make sure you're listening on speakers that are at least roughly comparable to what most of your listeners will have. Who was it, one of our prior meetings said that he'd sit in the car with his laptop on wireless? That's a cool idea. Do that. You want to listen to what the listener is actually going to be hearing. Okay.
Stephen, in a stream like that where you've got 16 different bass controls, how many would you likely tweak before you said, okay, now I got to go listen for a while? Or do you just tweak one?
One or two at most. And then the only time I will do more than one is if I'm very sure what they'll do. So yes, when I'm learning this processor, when it's still on the bench, I'll even make some pretty dramatic changes so that I can get an idea of what this warm bass does. I might crank that by 2 or 3 dBs. Just to see what it sounds like, and then put it back where it was. And then I'll come over here, bang on him a little bit, see what it sounds like, and then put him back to where he was. I mean, I'm old school enough to where I'll even have a notepad and a pen in front of me. And I'll make notes and say, all right, deep bass was at 24 decibels per octave. Fat harmonics, apparently I decided I hated those. Because -20 is inaudible. And then fat bass. To me, what they call the fat bass is actually, you'd call it lower mid bass. I'm going to say, and to me, it sounded like it's in, say, the 100 to 150 hertz region. To me, if you have too much of that, it just makes your audio chewy. It makes it thumpy, boxy, and chewy. So I tend not to mess with their fat bass.
I don't know. Fat bass is supposed to be funky. I thought fat is like a funky sound. So, you got to have it's different than a pounding sound. This is the problem about bass words. Like, talking about sound is like dancing about architecture sometimes. And this is just confusing because it's you're right. Like your fat harmonics there, well, like fat harmonics relative to what frequency, and it is comical.
Yeah, no, the first time I ever adjusted one of their later processors, not that old AM5 I showed you a minute ago, but the first time I had one of like a 7 or an 8, where they really started getting into this, I really did set it on the bench and hook it to speakers just so that I could hear what in the devil is a fat bass? What in the devil is the solar plexus? But to answer your question, Harry, and that was a very good question. I'm not going to change at most more than 1 or 2 things. I'm only going to make small changes. I emphasized that in our very first meeting. And as I recall, I even got questioned about it a couple of times. Somebody said, you mean to tell me that manager spends $1 million on a new processor and I'm going to tell him it may take 2 weeks to get it right? Yes. but it's worth the investment. You remember are adjusting a state machine that has hard absolute limits, and changing 1 dB over here can make a dramatic difference to what happens over here to what you're hearing here. So make very small changes. This is where, and by the way, I've got to see if I can get into that one I told you about that it's been revamped for AM. This is where I can set up, different settings for both FM and HD. Analog output level, I can adjust the AES, which is what we're actually using. Analog is for backup. I have an old FM30 up there too. AES, live wire, because they're not about to call it WheatNet. And AOIP sounds too technical, so they just call it live wire. Headphone, you can pick what you're going to be listening to. But as you can see, there's a tremendous range of options here. One thing also on all these processors, I don't know if you noticed it or not, but on the Air Aura a minute ago, they had one where you could select save input and output with your preset. This one, you can save it separately. Like whether you're using AES or analog, what your input settings are. But it's not a bad idea to save them. I guess I figure I'm so awesome, I just use the default. And there you go. Composite outputs, HD outputs. What you do, you can click on these and it'll bring up what I'm looking at. This is the actual clipper for the FM. By double clicking on that, I brought it up. Again, we don't have to worry about BS 412. Voice quality. Okay, I hate voices. I lowered it by 1 decibel. I don't know why I thought it sounded good to me. Those of you who are looking for a simple checklist, A, B, C, and then you will be competitive, I'm sorry, it does take a good ear. And if you're honest enough to admit that you have a 10 ear, find a friend who doesn't. But be careful. Any of you who've ever played music know that, like, you write a new song and your band plays it for a friend. If he's an AC/DC fan, he's going to try to make you sound like AC/DC. So it's the same in this. You have a friend listen, but make sure it's a friend who can be objective. You want somebody who can be objective and say, okay, one way to mitigate against that is to use a receiver, and you can, or a way to switch your speakers if you're still bench testing, and have a competitor or another radio station or another source of music that they can compare to. It's like I used to, I went to a couple of clubs many years ago, and a guy found out that I was an engineer and that I loved audio, and he came up and said, well, what do you think of my mix? And I said, as club mixes go, yours was excellent. And he said, what do you mean by that? I said, well, I'm not really into the club sound. You guys seem to think that if you've got less than 100,000 watts running into the bass bins, you're not doing it right. I mean, really, just chest thumping bass, which no problem with that, but I like a more balanced sound. But anyway, by comparing this, as you tweak and as you adjust, you can switch back and forth. Like you listen to your competitor for a minute, then go back and listen to yours and say, okay, well, sounds like my competitor is a little bit louder. If you had the budget and the equipment and could do it, the ideal thing would be to take your existing processor. You can feed the audio, the same exact audio, into this one and do a comparison that way. Or maybe even take your processor over to the competitor and say, hey, you care if I adjust this at your place? Most competitors love that. My limiters. They do a lot with just 5 or 6 bands of limiting, whereas you may remember the Voices has 31 band limiting. Here again, be very careful, make very small adjustments, listen for a while. Here's our AGC. These are the individual 5-band compression. They show you the crossovers. We cross over to 190, so that's all your lower. The low mid-range, upper mid-range, and then your highs. And what I'm wondering, I'm going to guess, especially from looking at the meter, I think he's talking right now, because that looks like human voice. Small changes, a little bit at a time. Sit on it, listen to it. Some of them do have advanced settings, and that's when you really need to be careful. Yeah, don't give me any advanced on the limiting because he's afraid I'll destroy something. Probably smart. Trying to remember where they put the diversity gain on this. I do have a failover. I'm not happy about not having my secondary input. We got to look into that.
I have a question about the failover.
Yeah.
I noticed there's a comparative fail, and the best description they give in the manual is it looks for input 1 or 2, which one's better. Well, I've got a true STL going to my transmitter site for input 1, and I've got a codec for input 2. Right. So the codec is 5 seconds behind on the STL. How does it define better when one is 5 seconds behind from the other?
I wonder, I honestly don't know. That'd be a good question for Frank. I wonder, and the manual just says it looks for which is better, but doesn't say how.
Yeah, which is confusing because, does it care about that 5 seconds, or, is it never going to consider it better because the sound is 5 seconds behind the original, so it'll never be better?
I don't know. I wouldn't think so. Let's I tell you what I'm going to use on my other computer here. Let's use the Google machine. Just see if we can get lucky. See if Google's got anything.
It's possible, Dave, that the comparative is looking for hiss in the background of the audio, and then it wouldn't matter as far as time goes.
Yeah, I was thinking it could be something like that too, but being as, these Omnias analyze the audio, it could be looking at clipping of the input, and stuff like that. Who knows what they're comparing, right?
Well, let me tell you this, and you've all probably experienced this one time or another. The great curse of digital is that it sounds great when it sounds great. But you can have failure modes where, if, for example, we completely lose audio because of some kind of glitch, and what ends up happening is that every few seconds you get one little pop. That drives me crazy because that's enough to fool the silence sensor. I mean, I guess the tiny little ultra stupid microprocessor inside of that unit sits there and thinks, well, it's somebody hitting a very small snare drum at 5-second intervals. That's still good audio.
Yeah,
I can't tell you how many times I've had to deal with that.
That's why I'd like to know exactly how they define this comparative, how it's better. Define better. Is one little pop on the primary going to send it back?
Yeah, I hope not. Let me see. You know what? They don't really say, and we need to know that. Why don't we'll send Frank an email and say, explain yourself, Mike.
Yeah, because I've actually got the manual open on that page, and that's what they say.
Yeah, I just looked at it.
It just basically says it looks at which one's better.
Yeah, define better. I wonder if that's proprietary. Frank says, I use a top secret algorithm that compares 133 hertz to 9 kilohertz. and the ratio has to be exactly equal to such and such. I don't know.
And that's why my question came about, because I'm sure I'm not the only one that has, a true STL, link, digital link, and a codec, which is going to be possibly 5-10 seconds behind.
Yeah.
Well, how does that affect the comparative? Is it not going to work anymore? So it's
that's a darn good question. Let's find a darn good answer. I'm glad you asked that, because that is something. This is one of those, I just knew that I wanted failover, so I clicked it, and it seems to be working. All right, we're getting close to quitting time, but I want to pull up that, see if I can get into that old Omnia that's been refurbed. I think we've got the software on here. Let me kill the screen sharing for a minute, so you can all see my lovely face. Hello, people. How is everybody?
I think we're enjoying ourselves.
Come down here. I'll get you some fried green tomatoes. They's good.
Did you say that wasn't just a movie, Stephen? They actually serve those?
And I'll tell you what. And then I've got a theory for that. I'm originally from North Carolina, and it just so happens that my region of North Carolina, it's called the Sandhills, which is between the Piedmont and the coastal plain. I don't know what it is about that soil. There's a lot of pine trees. It grows some of the best tomatoes you will ever put in your mouth. They're tangy and sweet. But anyway, the ones here, the soil here is very alkaline, so the tomatoes tend to be bland. And I often wonder if maybe they didn't invent fried green tomatoes because those tart green tomatoes actually tasted better than the ripe ones. But you fry them because we're in the South. You fry everything here. I'm still not sure how you can fry a stick of butter, but there are people here who've done it.
You haven't been there long enough yet, I guess, to learn all the gourmet tricks.
Oh, I know what I want to do. Let me see if I can get in this way. Guys, I'm listening to you, and I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. And when I get through with that, I'm going to stay put. But let me look and see. All right. I'm high tech here. I'm switching between two different computers. Meanwhile, you get to listen to my voice, and I get to look at things, and life is beautiful.
You should try Royal TS software. Does anybody use Royal TS?
What's that?
What does it do?
Oh, it's like a VNC RDP session aggregator.
No, I'm not using that. I tell you, it's gotten to where it's kind of hard to keep up with everything because everybody wants to do something different.
So far, my favorite has been Remote Utilities. If anyone's tried that one, I've switched to it. It's way more flexible software.
There it is. It's an Omnia 9. And he said, all right, .84. Let's see if I can pull that up. Omnia 9, and he's .84.
Did you need to log in first?
That's what I'm trying.
Do you change your passwords with each processor or the same password for all processors?
I'm not going to answer that.
Oh, default.
Yeah, well, I mean, all of them are fiendishly clever. They're P4SSW0RD. I mean, you can't get much more clever than that. No, that's the processor. That's not the... Anyway, let's see, where were we? I'll show you this one because I think it's interesting. I wanted to pull up that basically to show you. This is a little translator on our 850 AM. And this is BW Broadcast. That's who it is. I said Broadcast Warehouse. It's BW Broadcast. They include a little processor in here, which is not bad. I mean, it's no Omnia, it's no Voices, but it's not bad. Kind of cool, actually. Well, I can't find it. And that's totally normal. Hold on just a second. Do we have a remote controller on the Omnia at Parent? Let's see what they say. Well, where is that processor? I know it has one. Maybe that's something you have to do at the site. Everybody is becoming more and more inclusive, and they're putting better controls in their remote control stuff. There's still some things, I'm sure you guys have experienced this. I mean, like I say, these processors are nothing but computers. And any computer, every now and then, once in a blue moon, is going to hang. Especially the older Omnias, we had a thing where just about every 2 or 3 weeks, it would just start sounding fuzzy. It wouldn't be clear. And the only thing I can figure is that maybe they had what we programmers call a memory leak. You know, like it would use some memory. Let me get him to click this. Click it on the wheat screen. Okay. Omnia 6, Omnia 9. But anyway, but there was no way by remote control to reboot it. We had to actually drive to the transmitter site and do what I said a while ago. Had to unplug, count to 5, plug it back in, and we were off air while that was happening. It's a beautiful thing.
You don't have a SNMP controlled power bars?
Yeah, I said this was an older Omnia.
Oh, we get it. Is it a standard of yours now to implement remote control power bars at remote sites?
We are doing some of that. Actually, I've had most of my backup stuff is just to make sure I have a way to get to secondary. But yeah, I have seen people, that have the remote controlled. You're talking about basically it's an outlet that I can switch on and off.
Yeah, the classic unplug and a plug.
All right, so yeah, here it is. Let's see, did we connect? Okay. Now watch this.
Does it make those modem tones while it's connecting?
I don't know. I know, here's something, those of you who've got the geek in you, I know the older Omnias basically use Telnet. Because if you had a packet sniffer on there, like a Wireshark or something, you could actually see the Telnet login and the gibberish as it was talking. This is 8:50 a.m. Now, I want you to look at all this. Now, what would you think? Input, I'm going to go adjust my input level. So the first thing I do is click input, and I'm going, where's it at? Oh, AM, maybe? Noise reduction. Got a phase scrambler and a rotator. Let's go back here. Maybe if I click on the inputs. No, that just gives me a big screen. But anyway, I remember when I was adjusting this thing, I had to hunt. Okay, system, there we are, input. Primary source is digital, secondary is analog. And then, okay, how do I set the level? Source adjustment, maybe? There he is. This is honestly a case, I'm not knocking this processor, gang. It sounds delicious. And in fact, for an old 50 kilowatt AM, we are the loudest thing in Birmingham. Not necessarily because I've tried to have a loudness war. It's just this thing likes to give you dense modulation. Well, look at the waveform, for crying out loud. You can see. I mean, that's dense. I mean, it would sound like the Thunderdome. But you're going to definitely want a good manual on this, and you're going to want to spend time on it. This thing has things except for a coffee maker and a back scratcher. This is an Omnia 9, as I was telling you, that has been upgraded with a special package that we got from Frank and the gang at Telos just for AM. And some of this stuff, I remember right after we installed this thing, something happened. We were off air and it failed to switch to the backup. So, I hop in the truck and fly to the transmitter site. Fortunately, it's only about a 20-minute drive. And I looked all over for some way to force the input to be what I wanted. Other little things we learned the hard way is if you do have failover set, be very careful, because I had a situation where I was working on something and I finally had to actually unplug the AES from it because I wanted to be on the analog while I did some work on the AES. I had to unplug the AES because of the pops I was talking about. It kept switching back to that dead AES channel with the pops on it. So I just actually went around behind the unit, said this is going to be high tech, but it'll fix it for now. I just went around behind the unit and unplugged the darn AES cable. All right, let's stop share so you can see my gorgeous face one more time. Well, it's noon. Harry, time flies when you're having fun.
It does.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. So are we done? You covered everything you wanted to cover?
If you guys can think of some more questions, they could get them to you. I'm not opposed to doing another one, but I want to make sure we're not flogging a dead horse. Really, the keys, we sum it up. If you want the quick and dirty, the keys are install it, make sure he has good audio, pick a preset that's close to your format, and then read the manual, make very minor changes. I can give you a few tips from personal experience. Most Omnias, standard Omnia presets, to me, are a little too bass heavy. I like having some high end in my audio. I want it to be crisp. And so I almost invariably, I'll pick a format, like hot AC or something like that. But now I'll invariably go in and pull a half dB to a dB off the deep bass. Do it every time, because that's an Omnia signature. They love that thick bass. But yep, just make small changes, listen, save your work. I don't care how much you're going to hurry again. You say, well, I only changed that by a half decibel. I'll remember it. No, you will not. Save that preset.
Says the man from experience.
Ask me how I know. Shoot, if you were any of your programmers, you ought to read my source code. I write books in the comments. Exactly why I did this, what I did, when I expected to do it, and how it worked. Always. Can't have too many notes. All right, guys. I guess I'm going to sip a little more tea, have a little lunch. Got more storms coming tomorrow, so go check my generators.
And your
I got a quick one for you. Do what?
And your secondary source.
Yeah, I need to check those. I have a question for you guys. What's a good, reliable way to remotely monitor the fuel in a generator that shakes like a jitterbug? I mean, when it's running, it's shaking so bad that the fuel meter on it's going like this. You got any ideas?
Put the tank on a separate pad.
Thank you, Harry.
You could put a a precision pressure monitor at the bottom of the tank.
Yeah.
Because then the more fuel that's in it, the more pressure's in the bottom of the tank.
I'll obviously have to drill and tap the tank for that, but I may end up doing that.
You could put a T connection off of your fuel line. It would be the same pressure. You wouldn't have to drill and tap the tank. You just
Hey, okay. Well, see, that's proof now I'm not a diesel mechanic. I wouldn't have even thought of that.
Put a little pinhole camera in there so you can just check.
Well, like I said, believe me, we've tried that. The problem is it shakes so bad, actually it'll destroy the camera.
There is a sonar you can get a sonar sensor that actually shoots down from your fill cap, shoots down.
I've seen those.
Checks the level.
I just wonder if it can stand the vibration.
Well, the vibration, I think it pretty well averages it.
What about longevity? That's what I'm asking. What about reliability when you're constantly shaking the thing like that? Isn't it going to eventually fail?
Possibly. But there's no moving parts in those things usually.
No, I like that pressure sensor on the T. I like that. That's a good one. Let me look into that. Well, anyway, have a good one, guys.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen. Appreciate it. If anyone has any questions they can think of, send them off. Send them to Sean at cbe.ca over the next week. And if we get some, we'll send them off to you, Stephen, and then we'll look to have another meeting. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us for lunch for the last month or so.
My pleasure, gents. Have a good one.
Take care, everyone.